I am 74 years old, and for a long time I believed my marriage had survived. That was the word I used, survived. As if endurance itself was proof that nothing important had been lost along the way. From the outside, it looked solid. Decades together. No scandals, no dramatic betrayals. People called us stable, and I agreed. Stability felt like success when you had been married that long. What I didn't understand then was that stability can exist without closeness. You can stay together for years and still slowly disappear from each other's inner lives. I didn't notice that happening while it was happening. That's the part that still unsettles me. I thought a good marriage was built on reliability, showing up, paying bills, staying faithful. I believed those were the hard parts. I assumed that if you handled them, everything else would naturally take care of itself. That belief stayed with me because nothing visibly broke. There were no fights that forced attention, no ultimatums, no crisis demanding change. The calm felt like confirmation. Looking back now, I see how convenient that was. How easily I mistook the absence of conflict for connection. How quickly comfort convinced me that nothing more was required of me. At the time, my choices felt reasonable. Necessary, even. Someone had to be practical. Someone had to keep things steady. I told myself that wanting more connection was a luxury, not a requirement. I believed effort had a hierarchy. Big responsibilities first. Small moments later. I thought closeness would naturally follow once life became less demanding. I didn't see that life rarely becomes less demanding. It just changes the shape of its demands. I justified my distance by calling it focus. I justified my silence by calling it peace. When conversations felt heavy or unclear, I delayed them. When something asked for emotional attention, I told myself I would return to it when I had more energy. That return date never came. I believed that consistency mattered more than curiosity. That being dependable outweighed being engaged. I thought that as long as I didn't actively hurt anyone, I was doing my part. That belief protected me from asking harder questions about myself. Whenever dissatisfaction surfaced, I explained it away. This is normal. This is what long relationships look like. Everyone feels this way eventually. Those explanations worked because they were common, familiar, easy to accept. What I didn't admit was how comfortable those explanations made me. They allowed me to avoid effort without feeling negligent. They let me stay in control, competent and contained, without having to risk vulnerability. I didn't think of this as neglect. I thought of it as maturity. And because nothing collapsed right away, I trusted that interpretation and kept living inside it. The neglect didn't arrive all at once. It blended into routine so quietly that I adjusted without realizing I was adjusting. What once felt like distance slowly became normal. Moments passed that should have mattered more than they did. Meals where we talked about logistics instead of each other. Evenings in the same room, each of us occupied but not connected. Questions answered efficiently, not thoughtfully. I told myself this was comfort. I told myself this was what familiarity sounded like. I stopped asking how she was really doing, not because I didn't care, but because caring required attention. Attention required effort. Effort felt optional when everything seemed stable. I learned how to be present without being engaged, and I convinced myself that presence alone counted. She suggested small things, walks, classes, time together that didn't serve a purpose beyond being together. I rarely said no directly. I postponed. Not now, maybe later, another time. Postponement sounded reasonable, even kind. It wasn't. I avoided depth without labeling it avoidance. Depth meant uncertainty. It meant conversations without clear outcomes. It meant listening without being able to fix anything. Comfort asked nothing of me. Comfort let me stay competent and contained. Silence expanded, invitation slowed. I noticed, but I didn't investigate. I assumed this was natural, that passion fades, that curiosity fades, that long lives settle into efficiency. What I didn't see was how familiarity can disguise loss. Nothing was broken, nothing demanded repair. And because nothing demanded repair, I kept living as if nothing important was missing. It's easy to leave your own life slowly, one unexamined day at a time, without ever feeling like you've gone anywhere. There was a point where she'd stopped expecting anything from me, and I didn't notice when it happened. That's what stays with me now. Not anger, not blame, just the quiet moment when expectation fades. She was still there, still kind, still functional, but something in her had withdrawn. I mistook that withdrawal for independence. I told myself she was strong, self-sufficient. I didn't ask what it cost her to become that way. She stopped sharing small disappointments, then she stopped sharing ideas, eventually she stopped sharing herself. And because there was no confrontation, I assumed there was no damage. I didn't understand that disengagement is often the last stage, not the first. I see now how often she met me halfway and waited, and how often I stayed exactly where I was. I assumed patience meant permanence. I assumed silence meant acceptance. The truth is, she didn't leave emotionally all at once. She adjusted, slowly, carefully, in ways that allowed the marriage to continue without forcing me to change. That adjustment protected me from discomfort, and it isolated her. By the time I sensed the distance clearly, it already felt settled, familiar. And familiarity has a way of convincing you that what you're living inside is permanent. I didn't realize that emotional withdrawal can happen without noise, without drama, without anything breaking. Sometimes it happens precisely because nothing ever does. The realization didn't come with shock. No dramatic moment where everything finally made sense. It arrived quietly, which made it harder to ignore. She was already sick by then. Time, which I had always assumed was patient, suddenly felt precise, finite. Conversations took on a weight they never had before. Things we had avoided for years were no longer optional. In those final months, she spoke more honestly than she ever had. Not accusing, not angry, just clear. She told me about the ways she had learned to live without my attention. The parts of herself she stopped sharing because it felt pointless. The moments she waited for me to notice, and how often I didn't. What unsettled me most was how calm she sounded, as if she had already accepted something I was only beginning to understand. One night she mentioned a place she had always wanted to visit. She had talked about it over the years. I remembered dismissing it every time. Too expensive, not practical. Maybe later had run out. When I asked why she never insisted, she said she didn't want me to go because I felt obligated. She wanted me to want it. She wanted me to care because it mattered to her. That was the moment I understood there was no rewinding this. Not because she was dying, but because I had trained myself for years not to want what she wanted. The distance wasn't sudden, it was practiced. And practice, repeated long enough, becomes permanent. After she died, there was nothing left to misunderstand, no ambiguity, no stories I could tell myself to soften what I had been part of. I don't think about dramatic failures, I think about ordinary evenings, about how little it would have taken to stay curious, to ask one more question, to treat attention as something essential, not optional. I believed I was doing enough because I wasn't doing anything wrong. I see now how low that standard was, how easily it allowed me to confuse endurance with care and comfort with love. What remains isn't guilt that asks for forgiveness, it's clarity, heavy, quiet clarity, the understanding that a life can look intact and still be hollow in places that matter most. There is no repair in this truth. only recognition. A relationship doesn't disappear all at once. It fades through habits that feel reasonable at the time, through postponements that quietly turn permanent. This is what I live with now, not tragedy, not redemption, just the knowledge that being present in a life is not the same as participating in it, and realizing that difference only when there's nothing left to change it.